everyone, this is your host Prasha, and welcome to our STEM Stories, episode number 58. We just finished our Moms in STEM series, and now we're embarking on our Pride Month series. This month, all June, we'll be interviewing people from the LGBTQ communities in STEM fields. The idea is to learn more about how we can support our friends in the LGBTQ community and how we can make STEM more inclusive, because inclusivity does not necessarily mean only women. We want to support all minorities, and we can only do that by opening the dialogue. So this is our effort to start that dialogue and to understand the challenges and the achievements and all the great stuff that the LGBTQ community has to share through their experiences in this field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. To talk a little bit more about the Pride Month, I wanted to read something from the website of Library of Congress. So this will give us a little bit background of why this month matters so much. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. The Pride Month is currently celebrated each year in the month of June to honor the 1969 Stonewall riots in Manhattan. The Stonewall riots were a tipping point for the gay liberation movement in the U.S. In the U.S., the last Sunday in June was initially celebrated as Gay Pride Day, but the actual day was flexible. In major cities across the nation, the day soon grew to encompass a month-long series of events. Today's celebrations include pride parades, picnics, parties, workshops, symposiums, and concerts. And LGBTQ Pride Month events attract millions of participants from around the world. Memorials are held during this month for those members of the community who have been lost to hate crimes or HIV or AIDS. The purpose of the commemorative month is to recognize the impact that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals have had on history locally, nationally, and internationally. So we want to do the same and recognize their efforts in STEM fields as well. To celebrate Pride Month, we decided to celebrate the stories of LGBTQ people in STEM fields. Our guest today is a pioneer in doing just that. With his organization, Queers in STEM, Robert Ulrich is demanding for a more inclusive STEM community. Rob is currently pursuing his PhD in Bio Geochemistry at UCLA and is also a writing consultant. His story is filled with challenges and how he overcame them, from growing up queer in a Catholic town of Virginia to creating his own organization to support LGBTQ community in LA. His story is extremely inspirational. Let's talk to Robert to learn more about his amazing STEM story. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. This is so great.
It is my pleasure.
I love your work on Twitter. I'm so glad we got connected. And I learned something while looking for guests for this special, that I know so few LGBTQ people in my community, which I think a lot of us would, kind of agree with, that we don't expand our circles. So I'm really, really glad that I'm doing this series, so I get to talk to wonderful people like yourself.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to find us, but once you do, then it's like you're open to a whole different like bubble of science Twitter, and it's great.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love, especially I love the energy that the entire LGBTQ community has. I don't want to stereotype, but I love Queer Eye. That's my favorite show. Oh my God, I was telling my husband, I said, oh my God, we don't have friends who are queer. Like, how fun are they? So cool. I think that show is everything. That show is so nice and so nice. But yes, so I'm super excited. So before we get started and before we get into your actual story, I'm very curious to know, what is a biogeochemistry?
So I never really know how to explain it, because I guess in my opinion, it's really just like trying to study nature, like the functioning world around us.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just like it's very broad.
Oh, that's all. So you study everything.
Oh, I guess specifically my research looks at how different living things make mineralized structures. So things like a lobster shell, coral skeleton, or I'm like trying to think of a project to look at these cystoliths that are in plants.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just, I love when people have these really cool science that they work in. Like, someone was a space geologist, and I'm like, okay, like, so it's pretty cool. So tell us what got you interested in biogeochemistry of all the things.
Honestly, when I was a kid, I played outside all the time, and I was a little spoiled in that both of my parents are engineers, so I was always kind of wondering how different things worked. I always wanted to take things apart and just like really understand what was going on. And so I think that translated when I finally got to college, and eventually through a series of events like found undergrad research, and the lab that I ended up being in was like answering these kind of like very from the outside sort of seem like very simple basic questions, but we like surprisingly don't know the answer to.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's this is like really great. I get to ask like a super simple question that eventually will like satiate this like childhood curiosity that I have of just like essentially like how does this work?
Yeah. Isn't that great? I think that's so great about research that you start discovering answers to stuff that nobody has answered yet, right?
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the times when I talk about my research with people, they're like, "Oh, we don't know how things make their shells." I'm like, "No, we don't really."
Right. So is it just see, I'm already having a tongue twister. Is it just shells, or is it also like bones and other stuff?
Oh yeah, like the process is called biomineralization. So that's just the process of how any living thing makes like a functional hard part.
Wow.
Um, so my research is specifically with mainly like with these marine animals, but yeah, it also extends into bones and teeth and things of that nature.
Wow. And so we really don't know how that happens. Hmm.
Yeah, but that's how it like that's what makes it such like an interesting field is that it affects everything and it's all around us, it's inside us.
Yeah. And I was telling someone, I said, I mean, think about this. If we break a bone, right? And even today, with all the technology and everything, it's usually just set in one place with a cast, and it kind of heals itself. Like probably like 50 or 80% of fractures don't get any kind of like screws or nuts and bolts. And I feel like that's so cool, right?
Yeah, it's like magical.
Yeah, it just literally heals itself. Like, like
Yeah,
it's,
some seashells like do the same exact thing.
mhm, mhm. It's pretty incredible what our bodies can do, and let alone what nature itself can do. I was reading this book called Lab Girl, and she was explaining all about like how plants can talk to each other, and
Well, wait,
how,
what?
yeah, really, actually she was talking about some forest that got infected by one disease, right? And then they send these vapor signals, like organic vapor signals or something, to the next like whatever 50 miles of that forest to protect them from this disease. And so over time, like by the time these forests were like affected, like these trees were affected, by the time it got to like the whatever the end of the forest, those forests were already immune to it because they already got the signal. It's pretty cool. I hope I'm saying this
Insane.
properly. But yeah,
So the
so
trees are pretty much just like vaccinating their friends.
yeah, like they talk to each other. So I have so much respect for trees after that. And now I have so much respect for marine animals that can generate their own shells, which is pretty cool. So, the show is more than about just stories. I think it's so much interesting when it comes to really cool research. So tell us a little bit about your story of, of coming out and how it was received by people around you, because you shared that you grew up in a Catholic community in Virginia, and so that must have been quite a ride, right?
Oh yeah. I feel like I don't know. It like brings up a lot of emotions to talk about because I guess I went to so my parents are both Catholic and I love them to death and I know whatever like everything they did is like out of love and they just wanted the best for me.
Hmm.
But I guess like going to a Catholic school for 9 years and like not living in a neighborhood where I could like really interact with any other kids that often.
Hmm.
It's like very it just became very isolating and like shelter. Like I had a very sheltered childhood because of that. And then so like I went to a Catholic school and so it was like really small. We all like went to church every Friday and then we'd go to church again on like Saturday with my family. And so like I never really when I was growing up as a kid, I never really was exposed to anything LGBTQ
Hmm.
plus. So then when I finally ended up going to a public high school, I finally was sort of like exposed to more than just like the religious community.
Yeah.
But then even then, the only out gay kids typically seem to get bullied.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure like most of them ended up transferring out to like I guess more welcoming schools.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so then I went through that. I never really accepted that I was gay until I finally got to college. And I like, I don't know, I was like very sad in high school because I was just like, I'm different. I don't know why. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so then when I finally got to college, I was like, okay, I'm going to restart, fresh start. I'm like away from home. I can like try anything I want. I can do anything I want. And so it was very much going in with this mindset of I'm going to try everything once. So if I don't like it, don't do it again.
Mhm.
And so that like extended into experimenting.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think
uh,
it's always, when you're different in college and high school, especially, I hear these bullying stories from immigrants, from people of color, and that's kind of what I'm drawing from all our stories is that when you're minority, life isn't all la la land. Right?
yeah. And yeah. And like, because when you finally come around to accepting that you're gay, it's like you've been through this like sort of roller coaster of trying to figure out who you are and like what you like. Because you might have like I tried dating girls and I was like, is this how everyone else feels too? Just like kind of going through the motions.
Yeah.
And it was not enjoyable. So I was just confused and sort of you kind of get to this point of like just thinking like, what is wrong with me? Like,
Yeah.
why am I like this? Why am I different? And then like never really having a label or anything to attribute that to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It must be super challenging considering you also chose a field that I'm sure was demanding in terms of how much hours you had to put in, or I mean STEM itself can get um, stressful, but to put a lot of this stuff on top of it might have been really challenging, I'm sure.
Yeah, because because it's so much of I guess like you learn the most about being queer from like the queer community, like
Mm-hmm.
finding it, being welcome into it, and then like being taught all these things that we weren't taught in school
Mm-hmm.
about like things that aren't heterosexual, like
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's like a whole like learning process.
Yeah.
And being in STEM and not really being around a lot of other queer people because of like yeah, like the long hours, the like tough classes,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like taking up most of the time and not leaving a lot for social time and like exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just keeps you kind of like in that shell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's really hard. And scientists are popular for not having the best social skills, and that's not because they're not capable of. It's just because they may not have the time, right? I mean, when I was in masters, I think I was in lab for like 20 hours, if not more, a day. sleeping there, eating there, waking up, checking on experiments, writing the thesis. It wasn't like, it's not for the faint-hearted. It takes a lot of your life. So you can't
Yeah.
party on Fridays. You can't go out on, week for Wings night. Keep missing out on things.
Yeah. We're like
Yes.
nervously laughing, but it's like terrible.
I know it is terrible. So, like I had because I was one of the people who was so interested in all the projects. I would say yes to everything, and I wanted to try everything, and I would end up like really, like I literally probably have 2 friends from college, like 2 maybe, because I just never found the time to party. Right. So coming from Virginia, coming to LA might have been quite a refreshing turn of events for you.
Oh yeah. It was yeah, so yeah. Yeah, so by the end of my undergrad, I was just like extremely lonely and like in a really sort of like dark place.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, I was in a dark place towards the end of undergrad. I really like didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, or like I feel like everyone sort of experiences this like, oh, what do I do after undergraduate?
Mhm.
And the advisor that I was working under with undergraduate research, she suggested grad school. And I was like, oh, I've never really thought about that. And so we started talking about like schools I could apply to. And yeah, I think I was thinking about it, and I thought about how unhappy I was being in the middle of nowhere in Virginia.
Mhm.
And I decided like right then and there, I was like, location is going to be probably like my top priority. I want to go to a place that has queer culture, someplace where even if I can't get it, like, I guess like immediately, like at the school, I'll
Mhm.
be able to like easily access it outside of school.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just applied all around the country to like different cities, and I got in, and that was great.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then you went on to start Queers in STEM at UCLA. So how did that all come about?
So I guess like building off of that, I
Yeah.
was like, okay, it's like this is Los Angeles of all places. This is probably arguably like the most queer friendly city I can think of.
Yeah.
Um, and so the LGBT Center, Campus Resource Center here on campus, it's like one of the best ones in the country, and they are wonderful. But so at the beginning of every academic year, they have all the student organizations, like LGBT student organizations, table and for like other LGBTQ students to see and like be like, oh, you can join these. And so, being a school in Los Angeles, I kind of went in assuming like, oh, they have to have something for like LGBTQ people in science and engineering and math and that. But when I walked in, there wasn't. And
Mhm.
I got frustrated so fast. I like stormed in. I took 5 free cookies instead of 1, and I like left. And then I sent them an email. And I was like, hey, since this doesn't exist, and I was like new there, so I didn't really know anything about the process that they have there.
Mhm.
So I asked if I could start one and maybe some advice on how. And luckily, they were like, oh, yeah, actually, a few people have actually brought this up to us. Let us like connect you with them. And so we all got connected, and there was just like, I think there was like 4 of us, and we built this organization. And some of the other founders sort of had like personal issues come up, or they got really busy with school, so they drifted a little bit away from being like leading it and like organizing things.
Mhm.
But I kept it going because that did get discouraging. But
Mhm.
uh, I was just like, this is really important to me. I'm making this a priority. Um, and then eventually, it seems like people have sort of gravitated towards that. Thank God.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get a lot easier to run when
Mhm.
there are other people helping out.
Yeah. So what are the few activities that you guys organize, or how do you kind of get the word out?
Oh, we get the word out through word of mouth. We like email out to all of the department advisors. We
Hmm.
try to post on social media
Yeah.
just in case there's like anyone that's just like in Southern California or the LA area if they want
Hmm.
to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we host all like different kinds of events. We wanted it to be both like social as well as like professional and academic. So we've had like cookie and ice cream socials just to like
Mhm.
get together and meet each other. We've had like coffee nights or coffee mornings.
Yeah. Isn't it
um,
so wonderful to have a community, right?
yeah, yeah, it's been so nice. I'm pretty like a majority of my friends are in queers and STEM, and it's really great to have.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think people don't realize just the support and what a community can do, especially if you've had the experiences that you've had, in terms of feeling lonely or not having enough support. Communities can totally help us build our confidence back, right?
exactly, yeah. And I feel like at sort of like at the source of any activism is a sort of aspect of self-care too, where it's
Hmm.
like me making this organization wasn't completely like selfless because I'm also benefiting from it,
Yeah.
and that's great.
Yeah, no, that's amazing because I agree. Like, I think I benefit from this show more than the people who listen to it. So it's very selfish. I do it because I love to do it. I do it because I thought there wasn't anything like this, just like you did. And it's just so refreshing to see that you know there are people out there like you who are taking things in their own hands and saying, you know what, if it doesn't exist, I'm going to make one and I'm going to lead one. So that's what a true leader is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
cool. Mm. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but I guess like some of our other events or like more popular ones are like we collaborate with the astronomy club that's on campus. So
Hmm.
we've had them help us have like private telescope shows, which has always been really cool because then we get to all look at the stars together, look through the telescope together.
Hmm.
And then we also had a LGBTQ postdoc walk us around. Um, yeah, he's great, Dr. Justin Voller. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm very bad. Um, but yeah, he like took us to one of the UC's like research reserves, and
Hmm.
he walked us around a little nature hike and told us like the local research that was being done there, like the native species to California. Talked about his research because he's a postdoc in plant ecology. So it was just like that's been a really good event too.
Hmm.
I think our most popular one is I've and I don't know if it's the most popular, but it's my favorite, and it's a series of like lightning talks. And so we collect abstracts for a lightning talk about people's research, and we give them 3 to 5 minutes to just talk about their research to everyone, and that seems to be really fun. And the last time we also had a panel that was made up of different people at different parts of the career path.
Hmm. That's amazing. So what is your plan? Do you plan to grow this outside UCLA and make it a nationwide thing, or what's in future for this organization?
I have no idea.
That's okay too, because I think it would be a wonderful podcast. Like, I'm just imagining, like, really, like a very fun podcast which can bring a lot of LGBTQ people, um, platform. Like, it can give the platform to them to talk about their experiences, and yeah, it might be a lot of fun. So you should think about it.
Oh, that is a very good idea.
Yeah, and you could do it with, like, a couple of hosts, and you could mix things up. You could actually record your lightning talks too, because while you were saying that, I was like, I would love to listen to those. Those sound so interesting.
Oh, funny you say that. We did record the first one we did, but we didn't record it the second time we did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that video's on Facebook somewhere. I'll have to find it.
Yeah, repurpose your content, right?
Yeah.
So you can use it
Um,
everywhere. But I do see, like, a lot of, you know, I do see that there must be a lot of people who can benefit from this, and who can, again, be able to be themselves in STEM. I feel like it's really sad if people cannot be their true self, because STEM is a field where you need to be creative and you need to bring your best self. How would you do that if you're not yourself?
Yes,
If you're not
exactly.
your true authentic self, because that's the uniqueness that STEM needs, the unique way that we think is what helps STEM grow and helps us solve these big problems. And if we can't be our own unique self, then how can we really contribute to STEM, right?
Yeah, exactly. Lisa Gromlich, who's at University of Washington, she published a really good piece about her coming out and how she um, is like has decided to be visible, and she mentions how having to be in the closet at work like stifles your creativity and
Mm-hmm.
productivity because you just don't feel safe, and so you're constantly expending mental and emotional energy just like editing yourself, making sure that like nobody knows that you're queer, and yeah, it just like it takes a toll on your work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously your mental health suffers, and that's always, something that people, because you can't see mental health like physical health. I just don't think that people realize the impact of it. But I think mental health obviously causes way more damage than physical health, because I've had a whole episode of a couple of episodes of depression, and I would never want to go back because it's really really dark. Like, it's just, you can't put words, you can't explain people what's going on, and it's extremely saddening. And so
Yeah.
to live like that, or to even treat yourself, or just not be able to, again, raise your voice or say things that you want to say, or be who you want to be, is just not human at all, I think.
Yeah, because even outside of STEM, the rates of suicide and like just mental health among queer youth is it's like really high, and it's terrifying and like really saddening because these kids are just being who they are and they get kicked out of their homes or just like not accepted by their families.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the intersections of being queer and then also being a person of color, it
Mm.
skyrockets.
Yeah, yeah. That's like double minority, or sometimes even triple minority. And so tell us a little bit, actually tell us how we can all support our LGBTQ friends in STEM and in the world.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of almost like the same way you would with any other underrepresented group, where it's just be inclusive and
Mm-hmm.
use language that I guess things that are more specific to the LGBTQ community would be like the use of language. Um, so not mixing up sex and gender, not gendering things that don't have a gender, like clothes, or
Mm-hmm.
uh, misgendering people by using the wrong pronouns. And if you do, just apologize.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially good if you, like, when you introduce yourself with your pronouns to sort of open that, not stage, just like open that door for whoever else might be in the room who, so that way they're not like the only person who introduces themselves with their pronouns, because then
Mm-hmm.
that's just weird or just
Yeah.
like it seems weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, so do you also feel that LGBTQ is another community that may have echo chambers in terms of, not a lot of crosstalk happening, in terms of, like what we're doing today is, I feel like this happens in definitely in all diversity inclusion conversations, is that, we're all talking to each other in our little group, or saying, oh, women are talking to women, right? Women of color talking to women of color, women of, white women talking to white women, and LGBTQ maybe are talking to them within themselves. But do you think those kind of echo chambers can be broken, in and how that can help?
Oh, yeah. I think I have like two opinions on echo chambers because I think on one side it's very nice because you have this very supportive community
Yeah.
that has your ideas and you're just like going back and forth, like hyping each
Yeah.
other up.
Yeah, you need that. I mean, 100%. You need that because those people can understand what you're going through for sure.
Yeah, but then my other opinion is kind of sees them as almost dangerous because when you have no difference in opinions, then there's no development of these ideas. And so, yeah, crosstalk is extremely important. And I think maybe for queer issues, it might be easier because so many other identities do intersect with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, because
Yeah.
usually you're not just queer, you're
Yeah.
also female or male or a
Yeah.
POC or yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's to me that's the key in making real change, because if we can't talk to each other, if we can't ask these questions that how can I help you and how can we all help each other, I feel like we may never be able to close this gap, right? That even minorities have gaps between themselves. And, like I always use the example, like Indians live together. Like, I'm from India, and all Indians stick together, and it's very difficult to break them up. And, all the Asian communities stay together, and it's just very difficult to sometimes open their eyes to this other world or these other opinions. And I feel like if we can all just be open to being a little uncomfortable at once and trying to get out of our comfort zone, we might be able to create some real dialogue, which can then help bring real change, right?
Yeah, I agree because I think I feel like if you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position when you're advocating for a group that you might not be a part of, I think probably a good sign that you're being a good ally.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're only being a good ally in any sort of context when it's like convenient for you, I don't know, it's not being a good ally.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes people ask me this question, that how, intersectionality is becoming a huge topic, at least in the circles that, we're in. And sometimes people will reach out and say, I'm being expected to advocate for this group, but why me? Like, how can I do that when I don't know their problems? And that was one of my own, first reactions when I first understood the concept. And so, it has taken me some time to like kind of figure out how I can help everyone. But I feel like, what would be your advice to someone who's kind of going through that back and forth, that, I really want to help, but I also don't want to come across as someone who's trying to take the mic away from people who are really trying to use their voice?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice for that is like the best way to be an ally is to amplify as opposed to speak for another group.
Mm-hmm.
So using the privileges that you do have to put others on a platform. Yeah, sort of like what you're doing with this podcast, where it's like you're going out of your way, you have this platform, and then you bring someone like me on who we don't share an identity together, but
Mm-hmm.
you're giving me a platform to talk about my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I'm really just doing it because I'm curious to learn more about you, and again to learn more about this whole concept of inclusion. I think diversity cannot survive without inclusion, because if you don't make people feel inclusive, then they're eventually going to leave.
Yeah.
Right? And it's something as little as you said, like using the right pronouns, and just being open to the idea that this person, even if they look a certain gender, may not conform as that. And it's a newer concept, especially in the STEM workforce, which is, I work in manufacturing, so that's a really aged workforce. So we have a little ways to go, but I'm glad that we're getting started, and we're opening this dialogue and learning so much more about LGBTQ community, and about how we can make this world better for all of us, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, it's good that you're curious because that's what we have to all be is
Hmm.
in order to advocate for each other, like diversity and inclusion. Yeah, they go hand in hand. And the only way that we are all, the only way that we are all going to progress is if we all achieve the same, like we all want the same things. It's
Yes.
just we need to work together in mindful and like intentional ways in order to get us all there because
Hmm.
that's the only way that it's ever going to get better. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, and it's all about educating yourself about these other communities that you aren't a part of because at the end of the day, we're all like humans and we should all care about each other.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. No,
yeah.
definitely. That's awesome. So tell us how our listeners can help your efforts to make STEM more inclusive.
um, yeah. I guess like just the easiest thing is the pronouns thing. The
Hmm.
next is, I guess, like location, because you also don't, you want to be mindful of people's rights. I'm not sure what the statistics are anymore, but you can still be fired in some states for being LGBTQ.
Mm.
Um, you can also
Wow.
have, in addition to name tags, also tags on like in sign-ins for no photos if it's like an exclusively, I guess if it was another organization, it would be exclusively LGBTQ plus, but having things that say no photo because you don't want to out people on accident.
Mm.
Um, I can't think of any more right
And they
now.
can follow you on Twitter.
Oh yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. Yeah, I talk about stuff all the time. I usually my Twitter is me like venting or like sharing a meme or something.
Yeah. No, Twitter is so much fun, and I like that, it's a little bit more lighthearted. This, for some reason, right now, I guess I'm following really fun people, and it's really lighthearted. But sometimes it can get intense. Sometimes it feels like a movie that you're like, oh my god, like something is around the corner, where someone's gonna get upset and something's gonna happen, and that does happen sometimes. But overall, like it's a lot of fun, and it's just making the world smaller. And with efforts like yours and ours, it's probably making the world a little bit better too. So awesome. So before we let you go, tell us what's your favorite book.
My favorite book right now is probably it's called Writing Science by Joshua Schimmel. Schimmel? I don't know.
Mhm.
And what it's about is it's a really well written book on how to write science in like a very effective way. Joshua talks a lot about how like different story structures for how to tell the story that is your experiment or your study. So I recommend it to everyone. It's been really insightful, and it also has exercises in it if you want to start your own like little writing group to among your like friends.
That's awesome. I hate writing, but I but I need to work on that skill because I just don't think I'm good at it. But if there are any science writers, I'm sure they'll definitely get a copy. So thank you again, Robert, for all you do. I keep calling you Robert because my father-in-law's name is Robert, so I call him Robert, and I know you go by Rob. So, but thank you again, Rob, for taking the time and for sharing with us some parts of your story which might have been a little bit difficult to share, but also the inspirational parts that will definitely help us advocate and ally for all our friends in the LGBTQ plus community much better.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I also just found a list that of like how to better support queer and trans students. If you want me to post them
Yes,
somewhere or say them now.
yes, no, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one way is to, and I got this from a slide that was at a presentation at the National Organization of Gay and Lesbian Scientists and Technical Professionals.
Yeah.
It's like biannual at USC.
Yes,
Um,
so you can share the link also, so I'll put it in the show notes as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool. So the first one is to understand that creating an inclusive space is an ongoing process. Like what you just said is like or I guess what we've been sort of talking about, is that it's this ongoing learning process, and not to get offended if someone like brings up a concern. It's just take that concern, incorporate it, and like make the space even more inclusive after that. The next one is to recognize and mitigate the impact of systems of oppression as they manifest. So sort of like recognize what is going on, just in being mindful of the situation. And if it's something that somebody might be uncomfortable with, just like addressing it as soon as you can. One that takes a little bit of self-reflection is examining your own privilege and how that relates and impacts others. So like, I know that I'm white presenting, and so I know that I do benefit from a lot of white privilege just because of how I look. And so I need to use that privilege and use it to uplift others. We talked a lot about intersectionality. So when you're working with other people, try to use intersectional approaches that are inclusive of all different sorts of identities that any person might have. Being very active in your allyship by addressing comments that might be racist, heterosexist, homophobic, or biased in terms of gender identity or expression. So just like not letting your colleague who just made that really rude comment or really offensive comment and let it like slide by, like thinking that it's not like your place to stop them, or like, oh, what are you going to do? Like, tell them that it wasn't cool. Like, not to say that, like, because it's a bad thing. Not to view LGBTQ plus identity as like this monolith of like sole identity, because being an invisible identity, it's going to have intersections, and we have to take these intersections into account. So taking each individual and treating them as this culmination of identities that does make up their person. And then also, like what we were talking about, is creating this dialogue across different identities in order to spark this crosstalk and create progress that benefits all of our communities. And yeah, I will find the name of the person that gave this presentation, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, perfect. No, that'll be awesome. Because, that's so concise, and it kind of touches on every single thing that people can, start using right away, that they can start paying attention to these little microaggressions, or just little things that we just slide by, and we, as you said, we think it's not our place, but it's always our place if something wrong is being said, and to kind of raise that voice, even if we're not directly getting affected by it. And I think it's difficult. I think it's hard to get started, but at least if you start with being aware that this is systemic, and in the long run it kind of adds up and causes people to quit STEM careers and quit jobs and start different career paths, or leave towns sometimes, and it just compounds into a lot more. And think about if we truly want to have that kind of environment for our next generation, right? Because we would want people to have a better life.
Yeah. And we talk about these issues in STEM like its own like sort of ecosystem, but at the end of the day, these issues do expand beyond STEM and are just issues at large.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's another compounding effect, that, just think about how bad it is in STEM, or how systemic it is in STEM, and then kind of compound effect of that in the whole world, in different professions and fields and workplaces, can then create a very toxic environment for all of us that we all have to live in, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Now we could keep talking all day. This is so cool. And I loved learning from you, and thank you so much for your time, and happy Pride Month. And
Yeah, thank you. You too.
yeah, I hope you go to a lot of parties and have a great time. I'm just using this as an excuse to wear all my colorful clothes because I live in New England and people only like gray, black, white, beige, and more gray. There is no color here. So yeah, this makes me really happy. Thank you so much, Rob. Wish you
Yeah,
best
thanks
of
for
luck.
having me.
Yes, wish you all the good luck.
Thank you.
And that was Rob with his amazing STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Rob and his amazing work. Also, use the resources listed in the show notes to help you become more inclusive in your day-to-day life. Next week, we'll continue our celebration of the Pride Month with Maya's amazing story. She is a cancer biologist and she talks a lot about how we can make research more inclusive by doing small things. Her story is so heartwarming. Make sure to tune in again next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.